The Bulk Truth, streaming live right this second across Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X. Royce, welcome to your show.
Hi, Steve.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Nice to be back in the office for a day.
Yep. You've been out running amok around the country last week after the Jeep show.
Yeah, I think we made 6,000 miles in 2 weeks and delivered a lot of sensors as a result of that show. So pretty excited for the results.
That's cool. So you didn't write a song or anything like that, did you?
We should.
All right. Today's topic is the yield gap, where the tons go missing. So where did this topic come up?
So over the last few weeks, I've been in several processing plants, and it becomes more and more obvious that the traditional ways that people are processing materials and the lack of having real-time dynamic weights is a way to address some of this yield gap that we're seeing. It's
Real-time dynamic weights?
That's correct. So what Kadaro flow sensors measure gives you real-time data. Call it the digital transformation. So it creates that awareness as far as exactly what's happening at that precise moment versus waiting till the end of the day, the end of the week, at the end of the month, doing what they call the post-mortem, knowing it's already over, nothing you can do about it. So how do you reconcile the numbers? So trying to provide customers other options to be more dynamic and in real time and to make faster adjustments and improve yields.
Awesome. So you sent over this infographics, good looking infographic, by the way. So when we're looking at this, for those that are listening, we're looking at an infographic here. Yield is not a feeling. And we're moving from guesswork to real-time control. So walk us through this. Start at the top there.
Okay, so the problem is that static yield gap. So the traditional way today is somebody may be waiting till the end of the month or end of the week, end of the day to reconcile what occurred. And they may have actual known weights at the end of the production process, or many times they're doing some type of guesstimate as far as what they believe is in inventory, and then doing a true up later on. And so that seems to be very common. And so it really opens up the opportunity for Kadaro's flow sensors to measure that process. So really that's the static yield gap, and the hidden inconsistency, or the villain that we always talk about, seems to be things that happen. They're very small, right? But they're happening repetitively throughout the day, throughout the process, and they're adding up to be big numbers. And so that's something that we're trying to create a greater awareness and transparency for.
So we're going from a static form of guessing, as you call it here, visibility. So it's a reactive or assumed action, unexplained shrink, or loss control.
Correct. And then we're moving from that left to the right. So with real-time data, we're becoming proactive, and we're using that data and that information to improve the process, improve the result in real time.
So that's a big day when you go off of you leave the clipboards or the hammers or whatever the other tools that they're using to measure or guesstimate, as you called it, and all of a sudden see everything on a dashboard in real time on an iPad, on a computer. That's a big day.
It is, and we continue to experience. There's people out there that have been doing these jobs and working in these plants for a long period of time, and it's amazing how well they can do and how well they can perform. But again, they have to be at work, and in many cases, as they're starting to age out and retire, to be able to backfill those positions or find labor, number one, is already difficult. Finding that level of experience and replicating that is near impossible. And so that's we continue to see customers looking for a solution that they can start quantifying exactly what's happening through the process, and then start establishing a very static or very repeatable process.
So your solution here is a 2-point yield signal. So you need to establish an input baseline. Let's talk about that.
So it's pretty basic, but just knowing what's actually feeding into the plant and having a means of measuring real-time flow, total weight that's coming in on a shift, a batch, etc. I mean, we call that the denominator. So ultimately, that becomes your denominator. So that's what we put into the process as we go through all these different steps, all this different equipment, depending on what type of process it is. Whatever's coming out the back becomes our numerator. And so with that, we can calculate our yields in real time, and we can see precisely where we're at. And so as we start making adjustments in the process, we can see what the impact might be. And so this is pretty basic as far as a beginning end type scenario, but this is a good place to focus on for many plants. And then from there, as you go through various steps through that process, there's always those opportunities to measure, before or after each of those steps to know what the impacts might be.
And so your new Veracity makes this process easy because it's a smaller application or implementation, right?
Correct. Takes less clearance. So each of these plants that we visited over the last 2 weeks, clearance is always going to be, it seems to be the main challenge, the main problem. Number one is people come to the point where they want to be able to measure. Then you have to be able to find something that will actually fit, and without a lot of work and a lot of capital to make that investment and make that application. And so the Diamond Veracity, or the Veracity Diamond series, which are very low profile, is opening up that opportunity. And so it's the first generation of that line. And as we go to future generations, continue to look at ways to make it even more compact and more flexible for these type of applications.
So I'm curious, if this month end report, so some of these you reconcile. I was just thinking when you were talking of a checking account back in the day, but I thought it was a big deal when I learned how to reconcile my bank account, right? But you do it once a month. And then you would find whatever discrepancies and have to work backward and guess. And I'm curious about what's like some of the numbers that you're seeing as far as a discrepancy over a month of bulk material.
I may not have too many examples at the moment, but what I can share is, for the most part, on the output side, people, it's not normal that they're bringing it in and packaging it up and shipping it out. So generally, it's going into bulk storage of some capacity, and it's always moving. And so to have a point where everything's emptied out and they have a true number is not, it's pretty rare, if you will. And so they're relying on some means of going and measuring and estimating what those inventory levels are and what that production, what it might have been. And so it's fairly loose, and it's very labor intensive to go even to get to that number on a regular basis. A lot of these plants are doing it daily. So somebody's manually going out, making measurements, trying to make calculations to identify where they're at or what happened. And again, it's after the fact, so it's retroactive. So there's not much you can do about it, number one. And number two, it's still a guesstimate as far as what is it actually there. And that's where people are asking for help.
So I'm curious. All right. So let's say that I can identify this on the fly. What does it open up as far as possibilities of improvement? So I can assume, but talk to me. Maybe you have some comments. Maybe you have some examples.
I think the first is it just puts numbers in front of them in real time. So the fact that they are sitting at a monitor, the plants, they've started up the shift for the day or production for the day. And so they immediately start seeing what's the feed rate coming into the plant. As it started going through the process, they start seeing on the back end, what's the output looking like. And so again, have the denominator, have the numerator, can calculate what yields are. And how does that compare, as far as creating a KPI or a metric, as far as what should it be operating at? Are we operating above or below whatever we set as a standard? And if we're below, why? What is it that we can do, and what can we adjust? So what actions can be taken to enhance the production yield and ultimately the margin that they're trying to achieve for that day.
I can imagine too that if you're having to dedicate a certain amount of resources of people figuring this out on a daily basis, or maybe it's on a weekly basis, there's a lot of time set aside to for that accounting to happen. You're freeing up that labor as well, no?
I believe so. I mean, that's the time that's being dedicated to do the manual process or manual measurements. It's one thing to have that expense, but if I look at it, really there's no value add to that expense. So there's nothing that you can really do. It's the post-mortem. You're just trying to see where all the bodies are at, and what happened. And then you're going to explain that, and in a way, you're going to get reconciliation when it comes to accounting and the ERP system to say, here's how much material we had, here's what we should have for the end result, or here's what the end result was. So here's what we did. Whether it's accurate or not, that's another question.
Yeah. And so you're talking about to start off with a one sensor and then scale from there.
Yeah. So again, we got to have a way to fit the technologies in. And so finding the location that has the right clearance or right space, not only for space, but it'll accommodate the volumes that the sensors need to see or are going to see. And so on the input side is generally a starting point, is just knowing what physically came into the plant. The next natural place is at the end of the process, is measuring what came out before it's going into bulk bin, storage, rail, trucks, bagging, whatever. And so those two are I think the normal two that we're going to recommend for processing. And then from there, then we can get more refined as far as each step of the process, what's been taken out for cleaning, discards, resizing. So there's, depending on what type of process you're in, there's more opportunities, but those are the top two: in and out, denominator, numerator. Here's my yield for the day.
Then you can start seeing us across multiple locations, right? I mean, you can start to collect all this data and start showing it in one centralized place as well.
Sure. And so typically this would be in the processing side, from the material handling, as far as the materials that are being brought to a facility and then transferred in. I mean, you also have those measurements on the outbound. You might be loading rail, you might be loading trucks. And so utilizing the technology to measure and possibly automate that process. Those are additional opportunities. And then getting into, even within the same company, they have other divisions, other materials, other locations. So where we mentioned, usually it starts with one to prove it in, to show what it actually can do. So a company and a team can get comfortable, and then they start envisioning where it would bring the most value and benefit to them.
Excuse me. So the traveling around the multiple locations last couple of weeks, the kind of the various materials that you were looking at measuring.
So primarily we've been focused on grain and processed grains. So those continue to be our main opportunities. Coming out of Jeeps, we had other materials that were of interest that we're exploring now with different companies, and looking to get projects started in some other materials to get proof of concept and actually have base cases, business cases to support.
All right, excellent. So someone's been listening and they want the smartest way to start proving their ROI fast. What's the best way to start connecting with you, Royce?
So they can come to info@cadaro.com. We typically will do remote sessions, if you will, over Teams, have a discussion as far as what they're trying to achieve, more details about their facility. We are offering for 2026 with our new Veracity Diamond Series an opportunity to utilize those new sensors under a subscription. And that gives a chance to really try before you buy. So you can put them in, see exactly what it's doing, build your own ROI, your own business case numbers for a CapEx approval, and you can convert that to an owned unit by the middle of December in 2026.
Awesome. Sounds like you got your act together there, Royce.
We've got good customers, so let's help it.
You can connect with Royce on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/and/Royce Schulte. Just like it sounds, spell it that way. It's Kadaro.com. It's the website. We have these conversations every week at the same time, various topics, learn all sorts of things about the bulk truth. Royce, any last comments before we wrap this up?
Well, thanks for setting this up and look forward to hearing from some of the audience.
Awesome. All right. And that's a wrap. Good job.